Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 130, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
And me, Ravi Abbott.
Now, this podcast, I think we're quite proud to say, covers quite a broad range of subjects in terms of retro gaming and technology and...
Yeah, we have musicians, programmers, artists for all kinds of systems on.
Hackers on last week's show with John Draper. And we cover a broad range of systems as well, be that consoles, be that computers. But I've got to say, at heart, Ravi and I are total fanboys of Commodore and the Amiga.
Totally. That's how we met, which was just basically being fanboys of Amiga on YouTube.
Yeah. So we don't do that. We don't make any pretense that we don't love Commodore and the Amiga. And occasionally we might dedicate a show to a bit more about that kind of subject than others. And I know there are people that love that too, which is why, if you are a fan of Commodore, you are going to love today's podcast.
Oh, we've got some good news, haven't we?
We've got two guests on this week. Now, first of all, this guy's been everywhere. You may have seen him on Retro Man Cave's channel, promoting this new product that he's got, but also a very interesting history. And this is Stephen Jones.
Yeah, Stephen Jones. I remember going to Amiga shows, World of Amiga 99, and all of these old ones. Stephen would be on this stage, he'd be promoting stuff, he'd always be pushing stuff, even to the late periods. And he used to have a really cool company. They were called Cluster UK later on, but first they did the Siamese system. Do you remember that?
Checkmate Digital, I think, was his first company, wasn't it?
Yeah, Checkmate, yeah.
Yeah, so the Siamese, I remember that was essentially a tower case where you could have an Amiga motherboard in there and a PC running Windows.
Yeah, and it would have a switch between.
Or a keyboard shortcut, I think you could do as well.
KVM switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would literally switch between the Amiga and the PC. You could have the Windows in the other one, but also he had one with a Mac in,
right.
Which is like 3 machines in one, and that must have got very hot.
Yeah, you need liquid cooling for that, I imagine. Yeah. And also, I mean, the thing he's been talking about recently is the Amiga 1500, as he called it. Now, this was a product that back then, I mean, you remember the Amiga 500. That was a machine that they sold in like Dixon's and Curry's.
Yeah, it was. They sold it as a gaming machine, really.
Yeah, the Batman pack, all that kind of thing. And it was cheap, about 399 quid I bought mine for. Essentially, though, like I said, it was kids playing games in their bedroom. And if you wanted the kind of more professional Amiga with the slots and all that, the Amiga 2000 was way more expensive.
Yeah, they were kind of professional industrial machines used for like video editing and all of this. Well, this kind of converted your Amiga 500 into a low-end professional machine with risers in it. It had like card expansions and...
They put it in a big box, essentially,
a big box. It was styled around an Amiga 3000.
Yeah, I don't know if the original one was, because I think it came out before the Amiga 3000.
Well, it's kind of the 1000, because it had the little carriage bit underneath, and yeah.
It did look really cool, though, and then Commodore obviously came out with their own computer called the Amiga 1500. That's an interesting story in itself.
That's going to be more in David Pleasant's autobiography on that, yeah.
Yeah, there is. He's covering that, and also this Retro Man Cave video that we'll put in the show notes. He mentions it in there, too. But like you said, Stephen is bringing back the Amiga 1500 project as the Amiga 1500 Plus. Now, this is a brand new case that looks like the Amiga 3000 that you can put like a Raspberry Pi in there.
You can put anything in there, can't you?
Pretty much.
You can turn it into a VR suite. You can have it as a server. And it's a desktop machine. I've not seen a desktop case for a long time. Have you?
Apart from like home theatre ones, you sometimes get those, like home theatre PCs. But yeah, they're not very common anymore. And it looks really awesome. And he's been getting a lot of attention. He's going to be doing a Kickstarter very soon. So we're going to be talking to Stephen Jones all about a little bit of his history and the new Amiga 1500 Plus. And if that wasn't enough for Commodore fanboys amongst us, then we're going to have Chris Abbott on the show.
Oh, and we've got some exclusive news that Chris is going to be telling us about Project Hubbard, which is one of his latest projects, because Chris is a very respected kind of rearranger of C64 music. You know, he did the Back in Time albums, which turned into Back in Time Live. Mm-hmm. He's done Project Sidology. What was it?
Ninja Musicology?
This is hard to say. Ninja Musicology, which was kind of the last Ninja.
Yeah.
And it was a remake of that, but it also had all these bonuses, like beautiful vinyls. And now he's doing Project Hubbard, which is a book, 7 deluxe albums, all in tribute to Rob Hubbard, and a concert as well.
Yeah, he's got quite a lot on his plate, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're essentially right there. What he does is he gets these kind of quite raw Commodore 64 SID tracks and really polishes them and brings them in the 21st century and expands them far beyond. So, I mean, the thing about it is, you know, we talked to Rob Hubbard on the show before. When he was making these songs for these classic games on his Commodore 64, he was hearing the SID chip coming out of his monitor speakers, but in his head, the London Orchestra were playing it.
Yeah, because he was a musician initially who then did music on these kind of small consoles. So that was limited then, but he's bringing it back. He's kind of bringing it to grander scale.
So when you hear all about that, turning Commodore 64 music into orchestral pieces, and more about Project Hubbard, if you are a fan of Rob, do hang around for that. Chris Abbott is going to be our special guest on the Retro Hour podcast in around 15 minutes from now. Now, before we get into our news stories, every week we cover the big stories in the world of retro gaming. We just want to say a massive thank you to our donators. Now, we do have a little link on our website, theretrohour.com. That is a place where you can make, it's a completely optional donation if you'd like to help us out into the running of the show. Because, you know, the longer we do this show, which is weekly, the more guests we get on, the more platforms we get the show on, it all adds up.
Yeah, and it just takes that hassle out of our hair. You know, when you're doing this every week, it can become a bit of a slog, but having that kind of donations just makes it, you know, much easier.
It does, yeah, and it means we don't have to pay for the whole thing out of our own pocket, which is always nice. Being that I'm moving house and you're doing yours up at the moment.
Oh, God, I've got dust everywhere at the moment, yeah.
So we want to say a huge thank you so much to Victoria Lamburn,
Scott Goodwin,
Matthew Green,
and William Forrest,
who all made donations into the running of the Retro Hour podcast. You can do the same, and obviously anything you donate, big or small, it all 100% goes back into the running of the show, and you'll get a mention on a future episode in the Hall of Fame. All you got to do is nip onto our website, theretrohour.com. We've got PayPal or cryptocurrency on there as well. Now, some stories that we need to talk about. We've been kind of covering the Nintendo Switch getting hacked over the last few weeks. I will admit, I haven't yet had the balls to hack my Switch. I haven't done it yet, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet. Because
you're your fiancé.
It's my fiance's, and basically I have to buy my own, or else I won't be allowed. Or I just grab someone's in the street and start soft modding it.
Well, this may be for the best, because apparently people have been getting their Nintendo Switches bricked, but not in a way you may expect.
No, so this is really obscure. I talked about Team Executor, who were the guys who were releasing this software, which basically allows you to run homebrew or backup games on the machine or play emulators on your Switch. So this is the kind of one piece of software that you need, Team Execute.
And they're selling this, are they?
And they're selling this software. But what they've done is they've put in a piracy measure. So the software to play the pirate games has a piracy measure in it. And they've basically put some DRM in the code. So if you're trying to crack Team Executor's copy, or you're using a copy that's been distributed illegally online, then the tools contain a brick code, which is amazing because even when you're doing the mod yourself, you don't brick it, but they've put a brick code in there and it creates a total random password that detects anyone trying to crack it for distribution online. So it will just like randomize the password and you're just completely screwed. You can't get in there.
That is a very definition of irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
The tool that you use to pirate has anti-piracy measures in there.
Yeah, and it renders the Switch unable to read or write files. So it's just useless. I'm sure you won't even be able to play your games on it or even save your games.
That's pretty harsh.
Yeah, it is really harsh. And the damage is reversible, but you really need to know what you're doing. So,
you know, I'm kind of hoping. I'm hoping someone hacks that and distributes it. Of course, that is fair, surely.
Yeah, I guess they're thinking, oh, we've done this and we've created something. Okay, it can play backups, but it can also play unrestricted software and stuff like this. So we need some money for it. But I think protecting it with bricking DRM is a bit hardcore.
The thing about it is, if anyone knows how to make good DRM, it's the guys that crack it in the first place, I guess, isn't it? So there you go. So maybe it's not able to get around that easily, but yeah, that did make me laugh. That was kind of funny.
It's an interesting moral dilemma, isn't it?
So if you want to find out more about that, we'll put a little link to the article on Nintendo Life, because it's been getting a lot of column inches, this hack, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, the fact is that it's a hardware hack.
Yeah.
So you couldn't screw up your Switch until now.
So if you want to find out more about that and any other story that we talk about, we put them all in our show notes at theretrohour.com, including this link to a new Toejam and Earl game. Now, this has been a while in the making.
Yeah, this finished way back in March 2015. The Kickstarter did for it, and it was brand new Toejam and Earl, all HD and.
You remember the Mega Drive game? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of done up and look really nice. They raised $500,000 as well. So this was done by Adult Swim Games, who are the guys that have that kids cartoon channel. Really weird name for it, isn't it? Adult Swim.
Yeah, you wouldn't associate that with being a kids channel, really, would you? But,
yeah. Maybe someone can inform us why it's called that. But yeah, they were kind of looking at releasing it, and it all kind of didn't happen. And people were wondering, is this game going to happen at all? You know,
so are we going to get Kickstarters?
Yeah, are we going to get the new Toejam and Earl? Is it going to be Duke Nukem Forever?
Yeah.
But another group called Human Nature Studios have started talking about a potential release date. Now, they've also said that they're going to be doing console releases, which was a big worry by people. They thought maybe you'll just get a small Steam version and there'll be no console. But they're saying that they're going into private beta at the moment, and you know, it's going to be out and it's going to be fun. Have you got a clip there?
Yeah, so this is a little trailer that they've put on. The game is going to be called Toejam and Earl, Back in the Groove Spot. So check this out.
Yo, Earl, we made it back to Earth.
And it only took 26 years. Not bad.
First thing we need to do is get some new pagers. Mine must be broke, because I haven't gotten a page since 1991.
I just hope people recognize us now that we're all high def and whatnot.
Earl, I'm red with 3 legs, you're orange and huge, we're aliens, and we're mad funky. People gonna recognize us. Toejam and Earl back in the groove. It's an all-new adventure game from 1991.
That is awesome. I love the fact they've got all those references like pages and stuff in there as well. It's kind of like that Bubsy trailer that we played, for the new Bubsy game, where he was kind of referencing like, Sonic the Hedgehog called him up and all that stuff. I love it when they kind of do those references.
Well, I think this is going to be ideal for the Switch as well. And they're saying that the Switch version of the game is ready and has been kind of sent for certification by Nintendo. Yeah. So we'll see if that comes back.
If not, it'll be available on your favourite crack system. But what I like about that trailer as well is, do you remember Toejam and Earl? It was kind of full of 90s pop references, and it was even that kind of funk soundtrack that was in the background.
Yeah, it reminded me of like Cool Spot and that kind of period.
Yeah, the Tood period, I think it's being commonly referred to these days. Yeah. It's cool to see old franchises making a comeback though, and especially games like that where it's kind of more on the obscure end. It's like you didn't think you'd ever get to see a new Toejam and Earl game, but it's awesome that you can.
And it's good that this Kickstarter's been saved.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of good Kickstarters, well, there is going to be a Kickstarter for some brand new Amiga cases. Now, we did tease this a little bit earlier on, but let's get him on Skype. Welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, Stephen Jones.
Thanks very much for having me, and it's really nice to talk. I've been kind of looking forward to this, to be on your show for quite some time now. It'd be good.
Well, we're big fans of your YouTube channel as well, because you've actually got your own channel that's been running for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, on and on. It has been going on. So I think since about 2007, 2008. I've mostly been doing AROS, but I always throw in the videos about my Amigas, and my collection seems to have grown recently, so probably something to do with this case. Every
time I go on YouTube, I get a recommendation, is the Raspberry Pi the best Amiga? Always comes in my sidebar.
Well, I always remember seeing you around at shows as well, like World of Amiga and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the shows were so long ago. It just seems like a different lifetime. But I loved doing the shows. I really did. They were such good fun. It's just a shame. But I missed the last one. There was the 30th. I missed the German one I wanted to go to. The Amiga 32, I think it was. I went to the one in London, the 30th, and that was pretty good. So
Ravi was in Germany. He said it was a lively weekend.
Oh, you'd love it. It was ram-packed and there was lots of Pilsner.
Yeah, I could tell you a story about some schnapps and Pilsner, but that was back in the 90s.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. Well, that was the one where we went partying the night. We set the stand up, went partying the night before, drunk way too much, finished about 2 a.m, and then when everyone was turning up at the stand in the morning, the guy was working me said, "You'll have to come back in an hour. He's absolutely out of it." I drunk way too much.
Well, Steve, for people that might not be familiar with your background, tell us just briefly about the Amiga and projects you were involved with back then.
So I suppose the one most people hopefully remember me for is obviously the 1500, which they've probably seen the video, but that was where we tried to build an Amiga 2000 type machine based on the 500, and that was relatively successful. We had a bit of a run-in with Commodore, obviously, but and then I later developed a product called Siamese System, which I think was probably one of the best things I was involved with, which allowed you to make a hybrid Amiga PC system And it was almost, you felt like you was running a single computer, and you could retarget the Amiga's graphics onto the Windows display. Nowadays, we take for granted virtual machines. Back then, you had to do it with multiple computers, and we kind of smoothed that over so you could run Amiga software, Mac software, and Windows software all at the same time. I was also a distributor for a number of 24-bit graphics cards, and I was a distributor for Can Do, and there's a whole load of other things that I did. Up until very late 90s, until the Gateway, the Gateway thing, which kind of finished it all off.
I mean, for those that might not have seen Neil's video that he did about this Amiga 1500, it was essentially you transplanted the Amiga 500's case into a big box system, didn't you? And it would turn it into a machine that you could have loads of expansions for.
Yeah, so basically the idea was you take the Amiga 500 motherboard and the floppy disk and you put it into our case. The Amiga 500 keyboard went into a separate housing that we had, and there was an expansion socket, so you could put, for example, an A590 disassembled inside, or a GVP card, a SCSI RAM card, and then you could stick a flicker fixer in there. You could stick an accelerator card, and it all went into this really sturdy metal case. And we took it all around the big shows. We was taking it to like the CAD shows and the music fairs and that kind of thing, a high-end professional stuff. We never bumped into Commodore there, unfortunately. But so we tried to promote it as the Amiga as a serious machine. But we was obviously been a bit cheeky with the name, but also the fact that if you built a machine with this and the Amiga 500, you're knocking off about £750 off of the cost as if you built the same thing with the 2000.
Well, your new machine is a desktop case, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And having a desktop case nowadays is a real rarity. And you can put other boards in there?
Yeah, so you're actually bringing back the Amiga 1500 as a new design.
Yes, I mean, it's important for people to know I didn't actually design the original one. I do keep trying to make this clear. Myself and James, we distributed it for them. And it was always one of the things that I thought was a fantastic concept. And I loved it. But, it's like over the years, you think, I would have done things slightly differently. And I know that David Pleasance had agreed to correct the story of the 1500 in his new book. And so I thought, well, I mean, I really set this up as a hobby. I thought I'd do design, and if there's anyone interested, then maybe we can rekindle the flame. But it's actually gone nuts. Really shocked me. So I'm not going to claim huge credit for the design because I'm copying the look of that beautiful A3000. But I think I've added some bits that the 3000 could never have done, and it's more like, as I said, it's like the new Mini compared to the old Mini. But it can do an awful lot.
And what kind of... Because, I mean, I've seen the videos that you've done on YouTube and Neil did as well. So, essentially, this is going to be a modern version of that Amiga 1500 that you did back in the day, but you can fit a load of different machines in here. I mean, what boards are going to be able to fit into this new case? Yeah,
so the interesting thing is... okay, so the main one is it takes the Amiga 500, same thing again, put an expansion slot in it, etc., etc. But we can also take 1200 motherboard and the 600 motherboards. They won't, at the moment, in the early stages, they won't have the expansion card because of connector issues, maybe later on. We can stick in a Tabor 1222 when that's finished and ready. We can stick any micro ATX motherboard in, any mini ITX motherboard in it. So pretty much... I obviously wanted a really good Amiga. I mean, I've got a Vampire and I've got VLab Motion, all this kind of stuff I want to build with the 500. But I also want to build a virtual reality machine. A lot of people don't know that Virtuality, when it was the first commercial virtual reality system in the late 90s, and that was powered by Commodore Amiga 3000s. Yeah. We obviously want to sell these to PC builders who have a retro leaning. I think that's the best way of putting it. And it is very true. There are so few, and I don't even know of any desktop cases. So, I'm hoping the 500 sales will be great, and I'm pretty confident we'll do the numbers we need. And then the Amiga owners will get a nice case, hopefully, and they'll be very happy with it. But there is a potential that the PC community may actually like what we're doing here. And have a bit of nostalgia and yet still build a really powerful virtual reality, I can't even say it, a virtual reality system based around a case that's designed to look just like the 3000.
And you've also got a choice of colours, so we've never seen a black 3000 before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the colours at the moment are obviously two. Is the black, and then there'll be... It's called Oyster White. And if anyone wants to actually look online, if you search online for RAL colour charts and then look for the number 1013, which after a poll I did on my Facebook group, that was the winner. So it's kind of making it look retro, but not too much, but a nice creamy colour, similar to the original 3000. But as it turned out, in the beginning, it was everyone went, no, I want it. It's got to be white. It's got to be looking. It's got to be the same colour. And then they saw the black diagrams. They went, no, I've got to have black. I've got to have black. So it's about a 25% going for the white and about 75 for the black at the moment.
See, I looked at it and I thought, yeah, I mean, I could either put a vampire machine in there and have a really sexy desktop Amiga, or I thought maybe I'd just make a really good emulation machine and put it in there. That'd be nice.
Yeah. The other thing I'm trying to do at the moment is, I don't want to talk too much about it at the moment, but I'm hoping to put a really good, if people want me to build them a complete PC system, to be able to include a really good emulation system with it as well, so they get the best of both worlds. Now, be that on Windows or Linux. Hopefully we'll be doing Linux, but some people obviously, if you're into virtual reality, you've got no choice, you have to have Windows. But I'm hoping to put together a good little package for that and include it with the systems. And then obviously they can have their Amiga layer and making it look really nice. And I'm hoping to base it around AmiKit at the moment.
So when are these likely to be available, and have you got like a cost in mind?
Well, the target price has always been £150 for the case. Obviously that doesn't include the keyboard. That's purely the case. And there's an LED board inside, and obviously all the screws and bits you need to hold it together. So we originally was looking at prices, and then I did a poll on a1k.org, and I thought, well, I'll see what they say, and it came 150. I mean, I know everyone says, the cheaper the better, but actually 150, the numbers were ridiculous. It was like 200 or 300 people said yes, I'll have it, and going up the list, it was next to none. So I've aimed to do it for 150, and as long as we get the numbers, it's looking like I need 350 to 400 to make the numbers, but I'm over halfway there already with confirmed email addresses. So I'm fairly confident we can meet them numbers, and then the case will be 150. It's hard to say at the moment about anything more than that. I think the expansion board for the 500 will probably be about just below or just above £50. And then, of course, I'm not sure about the case for the keyboard on the 500 as yet. Also, the other things that are included, I don't know if you're aware, there's a couple of risers. Two different risers, a 30mm riser and a 45mm riser, which you can screw on or not, and then you can slide your keyboard underneath it if you've got one that fits.
Oh, keyboard garage.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nice.
I mean, it's taking the best from the 1000 down to 3000, basically.
Well, it's awesome. I think 150 is a good price as well. I mean, I remember paying about 400 quid for that Commodore gaming case that they made about 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the original 1500 was £200, and that was 30 years ago or something. So it's actually worked out. I thought, how's it cheaper? But I did the costings, and then I went to interestingly, the manufacturer that's making the metalwork is exactly the same company that did the original 1500s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, it's really weird. I thought, I wonder if they're still there, and I found them, and it was only one guy that remembered, with his long grey hair, and but yeah, he remembered it. So we're going back to the same manufacturer, which is to be honest, is really nice, and they're not far, just up the road from me.
Well, I can't wait to get my hands on one, because I know recently there's been those great projects with the Amiga 500 and 1200 cases, but getting a new big box Amiga case, that's a rarity, and definitely something I'd love to get my hands on. So looking forward to getting hold of it, Stephen.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and people have been so supportive. I mean, I've been taken aback. I mean, I'd be honest, when I designed it, I thought no one's going to be interested. This would just be me playing around. But the Facebook group just grew and grew and grew, and I think we're firing past 1,100 members at the moment. So it's been a bit of a surprise, to be honest.
Well, when the Kickstarter's launched, we're going to push all our listeners onto it, and they should all have a look at your wonderful case.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to the Facebook group in our show notes as well, if people want to join and ask you any questions. I'm sure they will.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I appreciate it. And if they do want to join the Facebook group, then that's a great place. I'll give an example why it's been so good. I've shown all of the good and bad points of the development as we've gone along. But there was a lady in California called Brielle, and she said, you got to make those drives take 5 1/4 inch drives, like DVD drives. Like, no, it's meant for 3.5. No, it'll make it too big. I can't do that. Anyway, so I looked at it and I thought, do you know what? If I'm a bit clever here, tweaked it, and so now you can get 5 1/4, and you wouldn't really know it to look at the front that it actually can hold 5 1/4.
Very useful that it does, though.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Stephen, keep up the good work. We can't wait to see it.
Fantastic. And thanks for putting me on the show. It's nice to say hello at last.
And of course, we'll put details to his Kickstarter and the Facebook group in the show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, before we chat to this week's special guest, Chris Abbott, I had to mention this because one of my all-time favourite games is finally getting another sequel. Now, we love Jeff Minter.
Oh, absolutely love him. Llamasoft, fantastic, crazy software company.
There's one thing about a Llamasoft game. You can always tell it just by looking at it, can't you?
You just look at it, that's Llamasoft.
Well, Tempest, obviously that was an old Atari game. And I remember the control on that. It had kind of that weird paddle thing that you twist around.
Yeah, and it's like a little claw that collected things in a circle.
We had to run away from things flying up essentially a grid, and it was a vector-based game, the original, which was really cool. And then, the original was a very, very interesting game and like nothing else out there at the time. But for me, the one that really captured my attention was Tempest 2000.
That was the claw one, wasn't it?
Well, that was on the Atari Jaguar, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, on the Jaguar.
And then there were versions on the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation as well, but the Jag was really the best version.
I think we've also played the Nuon version.
Yeah, well, that was Tempest 3000.
3000, okay.
That was a sequel that, it was on the Nuon, which, if you don't know what the Nuon is, Google it. It was essentially meant to be a game system that was inside a DVD player. Didn't take off. Massive failure. And I think, Tempest 3000 is one of only 4 or 5 games that are on the Nuon. But it always had, again, that Llamasoft graphical style. Jeff uses a lot of kind of in-your-face colours, a lot of neon.
Banging music as well.
Well, Tempest 2000 on the Jaguar, the soundtrack was that good. It was a proper rave soundtrack. It actually got released as a CD audio album
kind
as well.
of like Wipeout or something of his day.
Yeah, pretty much. And what I love about this is now they're bringing out Tempest 4000. So, technically, it's a follow-up to the Nuon game.
Yeah.
More people are going to be able to play this one, though. Jeff Minter is behind it, and it is available this week. So it came out on July 17th, a bit earlier on this week, on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, released by Atari.
Is it going to be on the Atari box?
When if it ever comes out, maybe. Have you read the news, Ravi? But what I do love is, again, it's kind of got all of that really obvious Llamasoft style, those neon graphics. And do you want to hear a bit of the soundtrack?
Totally, yeah.
Check this out. This is on a little trailer video they put up. That banging 90s piano house already.
It's like I'm in a tent in a forest in an old school rave.
Got your glow sticks?
Yeah.
Eat electric death, it says on the screen. This looks so good. If you played, my favourite Jeff Minter game of recent years was Polybius.
Yeah, Polybius. I really want to play Polybius, but it's out on the PS4. And I've got a HTC Vive, so I want to kind of play that crazy VR game. But it's amazing because Llamasoft seem to be really producing a lot of stuff at the moment.
What I love about it is,
and hits.
Yeah, people are loving the games they're putting out. But what's kind of really good about this, the fact that Atari are releasing it as well, is I think Jeff actually did do a cloned version of Tempest 2000 that came out on the PS3 a few years ago. And Atari actually essentially tried to sue him.
Yeah, I remember seeing some stuff in the news how dare you sue Jeff Minter?
Yeah, everyone was outraged.
Yeah.
You don't sue Jeff. So it's really cool that now they're behind this project and working with him, and he's got the official name. And we finally got, proper sequel to, Tempest 3000.
Well, it's 100 levels as well, 3 game modes, and a retro techno soundtrack.
What I'm really hoping is that they will do a VR version of this as well.
Oh, yeah, me too. I really want to come around your house and play on Polybius.
Absolutely, next time you're around. It's probably one of the only games I really use my PSVR for.
I don't believe you, though, when you say it's better when you're drunk.
It's more Messes with your mind more when you're drunk.
I can imagine.
You can sit there and just be like, whoa, yeah. You'd enjoy it, Ravi. I think it's very much a you game. So if you want to find out more about that, it is available this week. Tempest 4000, at long last, a brand new Jeff Minter official Tempest game. We'll put a link in the show notes at theretrohour.com, along with the rest of the stories that we've talked about this week. And also keep your emails coming in as well, and we'll do some more next week's show. Show at theretrohour.com. If you listen, let us know where you listen. We did like those pictures people were sending in a while ago of where they listened to the Retro Hour podcast.
That was really cool. Yeah, I'd love to see more of them. We had one the other day, somebody walking their dogs, didn't we?
Yeah, that was it. Just nice, no?
Yeah, simple, good to see.
And you can tweet us at Retro Hour UK. Facebook, we're on there as well. Instagram, we'll put all those links in our show notes as well. You can get us on any platform you like. And the next episode will be released on Friday. Right now, let's get nerdy about Commodore 64 music. Chris Abbott is this week's special guest. You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it is time for the main event, the bit that we've been looking forward to. Our special guest this week, welcome to the show, Chris Abbott.
Hello, everybody.
Now, Ravi did get you on. He said, you managed to convince you because you were part of the Abbott family.
Yeah, we're creepy and kooky.
Well, let's get into your early history with computers then, Chris. I mean, what was it that initially got you interested in computers then? Do you remember where it all kind of began for you?
Computer room at my secondary school. Walked in and they had 8 pets because it was a good school. This was 1982. So they had 8 pets, one with a graphics card. And once I realised what you could do with them, I could pretty much never left the computer room again.
Well, what kind of stuff were you doing on them?
Programming BASIC, learning machine code, playing Space Invaders, Pet Invaders when the teacher wasn't looking, playing the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy unofficial text adventure.
That was so hard, wasn't it? I remember that.
I learned the meaning of the word undulating from that game.
So, I mean, the Commodore PET, though, it kind of felt like something out of the future, I guess, back then, didn't it? Seeing that with the kind of Darth Vader helmet style and that green screen, it must have seemed really amazing as a kid.
Oh, yeah. Plus the little science fiction chirp it did when it switched on.
So what was the first computer that you owned yourself?
It was an Atari 400, 16K. My gran bought it for me around about 1982. 1982. I mean, I was typing in magazine listings and stuff, and but I couldn't get to grips with machine code on that. And mostly I just played Preppy and Seamus and Protector when it loaded. And it's the first time I've been impressed with computer music, other than when I saw Boot Hill at the arcades when I was 7, and it played the Death March.
Well, I heard that you first got into music, like really into it, in around 1985. What was the kind of influences that really got you into music then?
It was Commodore music, and I got a keyboard, a Yamaha keyboard, which I learned to play Axel F on.
So you started with the basics, and then how did you get that working with your Atari 400 then?
Not until 1987 when I got a MIDI interface for the Atari, and then plugged that into a Casio CZ101. But what I was mostly doing there was recreating Commodore 64 tunes anyway. So from 1983 to 1986, it was just like Commodore 64 composer after Commodore 64 composer being really impressive. The music of David Dunn gave way to the music of Paul Norman, James Lisney, Chris Cox, Graham Hansford, all great names that predated the glory days of Fred Gray, Rob Hubbard and Martin Galway and Ben. I think Ben was the first one that showed up on the radar because of Loco. What
was the first piece of computer music that really blew your mind then?
Preppy on the Atari 400. Then Hover Bother on the Commodore 64 and Revenge of the Mutant Camels. And China Minor and Tales of the Arabian Nights. I think it was that kind of stuff, the classical stuff, that actually fed into the stuff I'd previously loved on BBC test cards, and kind of got computer music and classical music and ragtime music all kind of mixed up in one big ball for me.
Were you drawn to MIDI because it had the kind of connection with instruments and you could control it rather than, say, programming on the computer in binary?
It was easier. The equipment didn't. I didn't have the time or the equipment to be able to learn proper SID driver programming at the time. So I was just using what I had, basically. When I got an old Amstrad Studio 100, which was a really cheap 4-track machine that had a record player in it, I used that. I just recorded SID off the Commodore and then played some drums live over the top. Eventually, Ubix Music came out, and there was something I could use to actually produce real SIDs, so that was helpful. Well, I was always impressed with any computer music that sounded good, but there was something that especially Rob Hubbard did with the way the voices sounded that made it sound so much more sophisticated and lively than everything before, like even in something like Action Biker, where the harmonies and the way he vibrates the voice, the vibrato, is just different to anything that's happened before.
So you built up quite a big collection of these kind of C64 MIDIs and put them online. Did this get attention of other musicians?
Yeah, that was the 90s I started doing that. Well, that was when I managed to get hold of a Sound Blaster AWE32 and started programming the wavetable MIDIs. And Michael Schwendt wrote SID to MIDI for me, which enabled to recapture some of the performance stuff. Yeah, it went onto the very early internet, and it attracted the attention of the fans and a few of the musicians who were paying attention on CompuServe and AOL. There were people like Graham Norgate from Free Radical Design, who was an early fan. I had to track down Rob Hubbard on CompuServe by emailing all the Rob Hubbards on CompuServe, which was quite fun. You could do that at the time.
Yeah, it was a much smaller place, the internet then, wasn't it?
It really was. So I got in touch with him, and there was a bit of toing and froing, but eventually, via a very circuitous route involving a Filipino-German record producer who was doing Christmas songs, we got to Back in Time.
Well, because I know today we kind of take it for granted that you can tweet anyone in the world pretty much and hopefully get a reply. It must have been pretty incredible to track down and actually talk finally to your heroes, I guess, on that early version of the internet.
Yeah, it was. It was amazing. And we managed to get in touch with quite a few of them. Some of them later on when the internet had matured a bit. I think before Back in Time, around about 96, 97, I was already in touch with Fred Gray and Rob, and I think Martin as well. There was a big period of getting in touch with people prior to that CD release.
Did you get much feedback on your tunes then?
I kept some letters that I got of people reviewing them. I think reviewing is a lost art these days. I've got a couple of people who used to write me two-page letters reviewing every single MIDI file I'd done, which was very flattering.
Yeah, I was going to say, it takes like someone's real commitment to do that, I guess.
And then they had to put it in an envelope and post it.
Yeah.
That's commitment. And it's a lost art these days. You ask people to review stuff, and even if they loved it, it just doesn't happen, really. Yeah, as people have lost the ability to express their feelings in the written word, I think. Not fully, of course, because there are still journalists out there and people like Andrew Fisher who do great stuff, and Paul Morrison, but reviewing generally from fans, I wish there was more of it. It would be nice, because musicians need more good feedback in their lives, I think, or even very sensible constructive criticism. Although I've got a good team of beta testers around me who are always giving me feedback, so they'll tell me if I'm doing crap.
Well, it's amazing the amount of you're right, the amount of reviews and feedback you get in BBSs and on disc mags and all over the place, really.
Oh, absolutely. And in the old days, I think when Back in Time 1 was released, people were there were two sets of people, really. Those who were quite gentle with it because it had achieved something, even if it wasn't technically perfect. And you look back on it now, and even after releasing it, I knew it had the technical limitations that were imposed by the budget. But people would. It had Rob Hubbard on it, returning to remixing, or remixing for the first time, and it was official, and the composers got paid. People were kind to it because of that. Some people were more of a, who are you and why are you doing this to our beloved music, making it available for actual money. And that was slightly less pleasant, and goes on to this day to an extent.
I found it really interesting that when Back in Time was released, it was kind of a commercial product, and I'd never seen Rob Hubbard on one other than a game. You know, it was a musical commercial project. And I thought that was really good. That was opening up to the wider audience of listeners rather than just the gamers.
Yeah, getting the original composer's blessing and getting it so that they benefited from it, both from the creative ability to exercise control over their own work and reach the listeners with it, and also to actually earn some money because they need to eat as well. It all fed into a kind of a good feeling about that got us through quite a number of CDs. And the fact I'm still working with Rob, and he's just reorchestrated Monty on the Run for a symphony orchestra. So 18 years ago, Rob Hubbard took my Monty on the Run MIDI file and improved it 200%. And now, in 2018, he's done exactly the same thing with my Monty on the Run orchestration for a symphony orchestra. So we're right back at square one.
That first release, you actually got Gremlins approval, didn't you?
Yeah, they were very good about it. Ian Stewart's always been very good. Getting other people to agree to some of the things proved very difficult. Steve Wilcox was not particularly helpful. Although looking at it, because of the lack of written contracts that the composers had with the software companies, in fact, for a lot of the freelance stuff, the software companies didn't own the tune.
Oh, wow.
They just owned a license to it. So in a sense, I was asking the wrong people. This is something that it continues to be an issue these days with the System 3 stuff, but I can't go into that too much because, lawyers.
Yeah, because a lot of people try and do these retro projects nowadays, and they really struggle getting rights for every individual bit, and they're all owned by different groups, so it's an amazing achievement to actually get something out.
It is. I mean, in 2001 and 2002, I actually did a round of all the composers to sign the publishing rights to most of their stuff, and that more than anything else is what's enabled the Commodore 64 remix scene to continue going. Because if I want to do an orchestral concert, I don't have to run around too much asking other people for permission, except for the composers, and that's the way it should be. We've got Defender of the Crown in there, so I've got to go and ask Cinemaware for permission. And if Ghouls and Ghosts ever makes it on, I've got to find whoever is in Capcom who deals with that stuff, even though it's half of its original following. But most of it, there's a big enough catalogue that we don't have to go through all the stuff that people doing orchestral concerts for consoles have to do, like get Nintendo's approval for every note, or get Sega on board, or persuade Square Enix to do something.
But I guess back in the day, the Commodore 64 scene, there were a lot of small companies involved who then got swallowed up by bigger companies and then bigger companies. So it can be a bit like following the golden trail or something, I guess, trying to find it.
Well, it could. At some point, you just have to say, okay, the paperwork is obviously lost in the mist of time and no one cares about it anymore. So who has a better right to the rights to their stuff? The guy who wrote it, or some mysterious functionary with mysteriously missing paperwork in the middle of an organization that no one has even heard of a Commodore 64. And that's why Martin Galway's stuff gets released.
Well, I've heard about the High Voltage group, and I was wondering what it was and how you got involved.
All the individual people in the High Voltage group is the group who organize and preserve and document all of the SIDs ever released. Even now, they're releasing updates regularly that contain hundreds of new SIDs, new ones that have just been created, old ones that get found on demo discs. I think it's up to 50 or 60,000 now, and it's a collection which there's a hell of a lot of effort goes into actually establishing the information about it, getting the authorship credits right, correcting mistakes as soon as they happen. And most of the other collections out there just don't do that. There's authors assigned to the wrong pieces, there's broken cracks, stuff with subtunes missing, and there's just not the same discipline that High Voltage has. All of the people in High Voltage I more or less came to know right back in 94, 95 when I started doing the MIDIs. And when I started taking on the publishing rights of the tunes from the composers, then I had to have a working relationship with HVSC to give them some, I am not a lawyer type of advice on various copyright things, such as I insisted that they change the copyright tag to published by, because copyright is a legal statement and published by is a historical fact. Because otherwise you can get people using that stuff in legal settings when it's not actually a legal document. Like people producing it in a court case saying, oh yeah, this says it's copyright X, so it must be copyright X. And hang on, someone just wrote that. It's like trying to correct stuff in Wikipedia sometimes.
When you're making these kind of studio versions or different versions of the C64 tracks, do you earn a new kind of respect for their complexity, even though they were very small and simple?
Well, they're actually not so simple. The composition that goes into many of the Commodore 64 tracks, not all of them, because in any platform there's a lot of meh. But the ones that we're doing for the orchestral thing, you do come out of it with a new sense of respect for the composition and melody writing and the sheer kind of music they packed in. I mean, for all of the composers, really. I mean, it's a different kind of admiration you get for what Tim Follin does with Black Lamp than with what Rob Hubbard does in Spellbound, with what the sheer tunesmithery that Martin Galway pulled off in Times of Law or Parallax High Score. But when you transform something like Parallax High Score and Barbarian 2, mash them up and make them sound like John Williams, classical music people who have never heard it before just go gaga. And that shows to me that this stuff, which, the tagline for the concert is going to be, I told you they were real music. Because that's essentially, you've got this blippy, bloppy stereotype. These are serious pieces of work that just happen to be done on limited equipment by people who had a lot of musical training or musical background or simply musical talent. On game music today, it's not as important. The music doesn't have to stand alone. It's kind of it's discouraged from standing alone in many ways because it's there as an exercise in atmosphere. Back then, these tunes were written to be entertaining in their own right, and that makes them ideally suited to great concert material.
Well, that's one thing that you've really kicked off, and doing something special was, Back in Time Live, and that was absolutely amazing with so many different artists coming together. And, with video game soundtracks, they're often forgotten, but they kind of remain in our consciousness. And the idea behind Back in Time Live, was it aimed at a general music audience or just the kind of C64 people?
It would have been nice if more general people had turned up to experience the magic, but in the end, it's very difficult to persuade someone who's never heard something to love something, and especially to get up off their butts and go to Birmingham on a Wednesday drab evening to experience it. So in the end, you end up preaching to the converted. The concert that's coming up, the concert in Hull, that will have loads and loads of stars at it. 8-bit personages, 16-bit personages. Paul Norman's flying in, Barry Leach is flying in, Rob's there, Ben should be there, health permitting. Dave Whittaker will be there. John Hare. Too many people to count.
Like a who's list of anyone that was involved in 8-bit and 16-bit music over here.
Well, that's right. I mean, some of them are there to see their music performed by a symphony orchestra.
Yeah.
I mean, how cool is that for a composer? It's like a gift we can give them at the end of their career to actually, it's the ultimate creative validation. And also the classical, the symphonic versions, they can be put onto sheet music and they can be put on a shelf in a library where they will exist for hundreds of years unless nuclear explosions. So there's an element of historical preservation of some of these things.
You're not going to lose it to floppy disk rot.
Absolutely, yes. Paper lasts for ages. Needs to be acid free though. But I suspect that there will be some curious people at that concert, and I hope there'll be some people who have experienced video game music performed symphonically in other platforms, who come along to see what the Commodore 64 stuff is like. And I like to think they'd be very impressed by how the music has come out, how much emotion and passion there is, how much meat there is in it, and how much emotion it has. So,
when is that concert coming up, and where's it at?
It's on June the 15th next year at Hull City Hall. The plan after that is for that concert to impress financiers so much that we can do it with the London Symphony Orchestra and with a 60% new program.
Oh wow!
The orchestra that played Star Wars playing Rob Hubbard. Yes, please.
But we've had Rob on the show a couple of times, and I think that's really interesting, that point that you made. And Rob said that to us, that when he was there at his Commodore 64 making those tracks, in his head he could hear like a full orchestra playing it. So I guess, it was a limitation of the technology you had at the time that you can now kind of realise that vision.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's much in the world more meaningful to Rob than being able to adapt his work for a real orchestra and have it played by real people in a real hall and have people react emotionally to it on that level. It's just the ultimate for him. I mean, he came back to Sid for Project Hubbard, and he enjoyed it on that level. Did some good stuff. Got back into the technology again to the extent that we were like, oh right, we thought you'd forgotten all that stuff. Apparently not.
Like riding a bike, you never forget.
Yeah, apparently. And then he started working with Jason on, I think this vibrato we should change this vibrato. I couldn't do that back in the day because I didn't have the CPU, but now we can do it. So let's do that, and let's adapt this and this and this, and and we were like, whoa. And then there was like he delivered 2 SIDs in 2 days, and I was like, what year is this again? But even though we're still waiting for a completely new SID, because there was one of them that was done that he didn't feel was up to it. That was an adaptation of an earlier work. So he's off doing another SID, which I think is going to be a bike riding one.
Well, who's the most interesting kind of musician you've worked with or kind of seen perform live and thought, wow, didn't know that was in you?
Probably Ben. The thing is, Ben is a performer and also a composer, and Rob is a composer and also a performer. Ben is born to perform, and he will pull out stuff. I mean, he did a gig at the Underworld with Fast Loaders where he was performing Last Ninja Wastelands. He was on chemotherapy. Wow. He was dead, and yet for just that period of time he needed to, he pulled it out all the stops. You can see him pouring himself into that performance, and I was privileged to witness it.
It must have been pretty touching.
It really was, yeah.
Well, Chris, is there anyone that you would like to work with still, or any game soundtracks or anything you'd love to update and do live?
Well, everything I'm doing as part of the orchestral project, so I'm kind of working my way through my own wish list there. I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't even mind branching out to other things I've liked, such as the LucasArts stuff or Paper Mario or whatever, because orchestrating is just a great thing to do. But also branching out to the Amiga stuff for 16-bit Symphony at some point.
Well, were you surprised for demand, like stuff like retro vinyl and all these kind of extras that people are willing to pay for nowadays that maybe they wouldn't have previously?
Slightly surprising. I guess we've all got to our 40s and got some disposable income. It's good that people want these tangible things, and sometimes they're actually works of art. The Project Sidology vinyl it definitely is a work of art. It is a beautiful thing.
Well, even vinyl itself's had a bit of a comeback in recent years. I know they sell it in like Tesco's now when you go in there.
That was a surprise, yeah. No one saw that coming. Well, no one I know saw that coming. It's good, but the minimum quantities mean you don't want to go nuts on that.
Well, one really interesting project I found you did, Ninja Musicology, kind of exploration of the last Ninja games and the music behind them. What went into that project?
A lot of Jarl H. Olsen's time, really. It was his dream project that he'd worked on for pretty much decades. And finally, just like I had to become an orchestrator to realize my dream, he had to become one of the world's best guitarists to realize his, which was to be able to play all of the Last Ninja melody lines on his guitar live without editing. And there are some. Ben Dalglish said that some of those lines weren't meant to be played by humans, but he damn well plays them. So Ninja Musicology was one of those things where, and this happened quite a lot, which is someone comes to me and says, "I want to do this project. This is my passion project," and I go, "Oh, okay then."
So obviously Project Hubbard has been huge all over the retro scene recently. I mean, for people that might not be too familiar with Project Hubbard, because it is very big, who's involved in it and what exactly is it?
It's the official, Rob Hubbard's official biography. There will be no other. And that's Paul Morrison, Kenny McAlpine, who's an academic at the University of Abbott, a huge Rob Hubbard fan, but also able to write about Rob's stuff in a very accessible way. He really knows his stuff with the academic side of chip music, but he doesn't write in an academic way. And just all of the details about his stuff. Rob's disassembled some of his code and annotated it, and there's a tracker being written for it that will be available, I think, to buyers of the book, so they can do their own Rob Hubbard SIDs and save them out as code. Dissections of his driver, looking at how he's affected the fan base. And some very good biographical data. Rob spends a lot of time going around Europe and the UK gigging with various bands, and there's some great stories from that time. I
think the thing about Rob is, I mean, he's such a humble guy as well, isn't he? The fact that he is like such a legend in the computer music scene, and he just seems so like down to earth whenever you talk to him. Yeah,
and he's always had a hard time getting his head round what he means to people. I think the orchestral concert helps by making him feel as if his music matters in a more cultural setting, and Project Hubbard helped because it was a concrete vote of confidence in Rob, and it really made him admit to himself that that stuff was important and it did matter, and it wasn't just stuff he did at the time to make a buck. I think Rob has always preferred to have people look at his art and music than him as a person, even though as a person he is interesting and funny, and really knows his stuff and has got lots of interesting things to say about music and life in general sometimes. But he's always been uncomfortable being the focus of attention, except when, oddly enough, performing. So I think that's... But when he's performing, he's being appreciated for something he's doing in the moment. So in his mind, he deserves that because he's a performer on stage. People are there to listen and clap, and they do. Being venerated for something you did 25 years ago that you'd never know you'd be venerated for, that's an entirely different mental state. But he's getting used to it. There's been such a lot going on, and so that when he came back to SID, he realised that, and we've still got to start the Hubbard 80 disc, which is the concept album of what if some of Rob Hubbard's SIDs were covers from an album he himself did in 1980 as a synth album.
Well, I was going to say that, Project Hubbard itself, it's got, for the standard pack, 3 albums, but for the deluxe, at least 7 different albums. So I know that Fast Loaders were doing Rock Hubbard, which
that's released now.
That's released, yeah. So what are these albums that are coming out, and are they all kind of different tributes? Or?
Yes, yeah. We went to the people, and Mark Knight, he'd always wanted to do a John Carpenter album with Rob's stuff, so this was the excuse to do that. He's a huge Rob fan, and a huge fan of stuff like Kentilla and Delta and Nemesis and Knucklebusters, and essentially he's done a 50-minute album with 4 tracks. And it sounds you can literally overlay this stuff onto a turned down YouTube video of Big Trouble in Little China, and it works perfectly, or Rollerball, or whatever. So that was his passion project. Uncle and the Bacon, his passion is always doing the big band stuff. Fast Loaders, their passion is doing the guitar stuff. And everyone on the Hubbard remixed album, that's also. The brief for everyone is do your favourite tune in your favourite style.
Well, what have people's reactions been when you tell them, you know, you're kind of involved in these musical projects and you're bringing these video games to a new level with orchestras and stuff like this?
It's kind of sunk in over time. At this precise moment, you know about the concert and I know about the concert and a few people know about the concert, but it hasn't been officially announced yet. And the reason for that is that the purchase order for the orchestra is still going through and the box office has yet to open. We'll see what people react when the tickets go on sale, but I'm hoping it will be Fry meme, shut up and take my money.
Well, we found a few of your albums on Spotify as well. That must open up to a different audience.
Yes. I don't know who comes across it and when, but it's always nice that I'm not a huge fan of Spotify as a concept. No, it's good for the listeners. It's just really, really bad for performers and record labels, which is why the Kickstarters would only ever make it onto Spotify as kind of like a cut-down version or something, so the backers didn't feel ripped off.
Yeah, there's that kind of infamous story about Lady Gaga only made like $100,000 in a year or something off Spotify.
Yeah, it's not really sustainable, but I don't know how it's going to be unsustained. Maybe when blockchain gets involved and you've got kind of cryptocurrency payments of artists and stuff through smart contracts. That could well change the equation and remove a lot of the middlemen, and that would be probably a good thing.
When you're surrounded by these musicians, how do you stop yourself from, completely getting excited? Or are you just totally nervous about the whole thing? How do you handle it?
Well, generally on days when there are events, I'm too panicked about small things like who needs pizza, to worry about the fact that there's everyone there. You don't really get time to pinch yourself. Usually it's a million practical details. When does this thing need picking up? Is the back line working? In an orchestral concert, I guess it will be different concerns, but mostly be... I'm hoping I'll be able to appreciate the event as a spectator as well as an organizer, because it would be a shame to have that put on and then to actually miss it because I was backstage.
Are there any plans to film it and release it?
No. An orchestra consists of 80 people, and if you film or record that for commercial release, you've got to have an agreement with each of those people, unless they're part of a union, in which case you've got to deal with the union. And the cost of that is prohibitive. For instance, if you were the cost of, let's say, London Symphony Orchestra doing a concert for you is 23,000. If you record that, they'll charge you 45. And that's not on top of having to actually record it, having to mix it, having to and everything, and it just isn't feasible. We'll probably be able to record it in audio for archive purposes, and to send to other orchestras so that they can play this music, so they can. It's a kind of like marketing to orchestras worldwide, so we can send the scores off and they can perform it in their country. So it's a kind of an evangelical mission.
Well, I think it's even more of a reason for people to actually try and make it over to Hull for the actual live event then, isn't it?
Well, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I say we're hoping there will be a London Symphony Orchestra one, and we're hoping it will be played elsewhere in the world. It would be nice if it became a franchise and went here and there and the other. But if Hull doesn't work and people don't turn up, then none of that stuff will happen.
Next we need a C64 the musical.
West End, yeah.
Well, I think Simon Nicol would be first in line for the lead part in that. He's a thesp.
Well, Chris, it's wonderful what you're doing with some of our favourite music and treasured memories, bringing them into new worlds and new audiences. So just want to say keep up the good work and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. See you later. Bye.